You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Some of you know we pulled our kids out of public schools and we're homeschooling our kids. And this is some of the things he believes on education. Remember, this was written in 1859. Look, you don't put your seatbelt on, you win the stupid prize. Those are things that that irritate me. The government shouldn't be involved in people's business. Where do they draw the line? When do they stop? They get that permission, then they get more permission, they get more permission, they get more laws, and then more law. And I'm like, I don't need your damn safety. I don't need you to put in laws to regulate I'm a grown man. Leave me the hell alone. All right, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined today by my wife, Suzanne. Gritty wife, how are you?
I'm always good.
Okay, today's podcast, we're going to talk about liberty, specifically the book On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. And I think it's very applicable to kind of the times we're in right now. Mm-hmm. And I want to get into it because it talks about individual freedom, freedom of conscience, talks about in the book totalitarian governments, how they develop, the risks in them. And John Stuart Mill, this book was written in 1859 or published in 1859. It's really a departure from some of the other great thinkers like Confucius and Socrates,
right,
who believed that, democracy wasn't that great. Now, the Athenian democracy existed at the time of Socrates, and Socrates was put to death by the Athenian democracy, and Plato didn't like it much. And so for a long time, the idea of a democracy was sort of, because Plato's writings are influential, they were kind of like, not so sure about democracy. Mm-hmm. Maybe, like Socrates felt, there should just be some better men that are in charge. Now, this really bothers John Stuart Mill, as it does me, because, well, who decides what's right or wrong, and who gets to be in charge, and right, who's the arbiter of truth and light and justice and all of that? And how about you just let me live my life and you live your life, right? And so in 19th century, though, a lot of people started to recognize, going back to, well, maybe the Athenian democracy was actually pretty friggin' good. Maybe we ignore a little bit of what Plato said on this and be like, wait a minute, let's revisit the Athenian democracy. And it had a resurgent, and British liberal John Stuart Mill was one of those people who started to recognize the benefits of that. And Mill would argue that Athens was the first government to be based on the ideal of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and that it was a model form of government because of its concern for individual freedom. Okay? And that's kind of our idea of liberty today, or government, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Mm-hmm. On Liberty was published in 1859, was one of the culminating points in the life of a great intellectual. The father of John Stuart Mill, James Mill, was closely associated with Jeremy Bentham and the Utilitarian movement. And so this just goes on to say that John Stuart Mill learned Greek when he was like three. He was fluent in Greek. He can't remember a time where he couldn't remember knowing mm-hmm. Greek, basically. He learned English. His dad wanted him to be a deep thinker, a philosopher. And his dad came from this movement called Utilitarians, where they believed the purpose of the government was to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of citizens. A government should be of, by, and for the people. Government by the people, of the people, for the people. Right? We've all heard that before. Mm-hmm. This idea that the government is there to, the government is not there to tell us what we can and cannot do. The government is there to serve us, not to tell us what to do. Right. Which is a major departure from every other government prior to what we have here, really, in the United States. So this movement was going on at this time. James Mill grew up under his father, who believed these things, that the government should do the greatest good for the greatest number of citizens, and it should be voted in or put in by the people. It should be for the people and of the people. So a populist type movement. So James Mill wanted his son to be an intellectual. He goes on to describe James Mill being someone who was real smart. In On Liberty, Mill defines liberty as the belief that every individual should be free to live his life untrammeled by other constraints, as long as he does not harm anyone else. Mm-hmm. It's a very libertarian idea, American idea. You know, every individual should be free to live and let live. You do your thing, I'll do mine. You want to sleep with every chick you can get that's you. Over here, I might wait till I'm married. You want to jump out of an airplane with a parachute. I kind of don't want to. I just want to drive a car around. There's you do you, I do me, and as long as I'm not doing something to hurt you,
right,
in a concrete way, which they go into, the state has a right to interfere with an individual's life only when that individual is doing concrete harm to someone else. If you're breaking and entering into someone's home, stealing all the things that they learn, invading on private property, if you're beating or hurting or killing someone,
right,
all of those things, that's when the state should come in. It should be clear. It should be concrete. The damage is X, Y, Z, easy to see, easy to
prove. Yeah.
So this idea is the traditional concept of liberty. Mill built on this concept an idea of a state and the relationship between the state and the individual. Mill believed that the individual is above the state and that the state exists to serve the individual. So today, not too long ago in Loudoun County, Virginia, you're seeing these parents rise up and say, hey, we don't like what you're teaching in the schools and how this is happening. And,
right,
wherever you stand on this, in the gubernatorial debate, governor down there said, well, I don't think parents should be allowed to tell the school boards what to teach. It should be the school boards decide. Now, in that case, you're saying the state is above the individual.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
The school boards are above the parents.
We put you in office. We determine, we the people are putting you as an elected official into positions to do what we want.
And the school boards had to be voted on as well by the parents.
Correct. What you're seeing now is when you have a major big public group of people saying, we're not okay with this. Mm-hmm. You have government officials saying, too bad. Yeah. We don't care what the people want, because they don't actually serve the people as much as they serve donors and unions.
People who give them money.
The people who give them money.
Yeah.
So it's quickly becoming less of a situation in our country where you have the right to, where they serve the people and they do the will of the people. And it's become more of who's going to pay me the most money, and I'm going to serve that group of people. And that's a really bad direction for us to be headed in.
Scary place to be.
But again, in his book, Bill believed that the individual is above the state, and the state exists to serve the individual. Confucius, in contrast, believed that the government and its leaders should exercise benevolence toward ordinary people, and that the state should play an important role in elevating ordinary people to morality. But he believed that the people served the state. Basically, like a king, you're all subjects of the king, people, yeah. And you serve the king, and instead of the other way around.
That works if they're a good king.
Oh, until some craphead gets in there. So the opposite is true in the United States. For example, in a Western democracy, it's all understood that these elected officials, they're not our boss. They're not our dictator. They're not there to tell us what to do. They work for us. They do what we ask, what we do when we vote in a republic or democracy, and then they act it out. Unfortunately, in positions of power with politicians, they'll lie and tell the people, I'll do this, 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 and this, and this for all of you, and I won't do these things. Lying to you, getting donations from organizations with ulterior motives, then they get the power in the office, and then they go and they do whatever they want.
Yeah.
That's not a servant of the people. That's not a statesman. That's a politician who is strictly there. And that's the risk with every power position, every government position, that someone will get into that position and abuse that power that they've been given. But the concept is still the same. Our leaders are meant to serve us, not the other way around. Now, you have Machiavellian ideas, you have Plato's Republic, you have the writings of Confucius, and then you have governments throughout ages that were completely opposite to what John Stuart Mill is describing. Okay, so I don't think people realize how incredibly different Judeo-Christian society has been and Western society has been compared to all of the forms of government throughout history, and what has come about from this idea that we have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, where the state serves the people instead of the people serve the state. So Mill disagreed with all those other ideas. He believed that the state should be as uninvolved in the lives of citizens as possible. He believed that absolute freedom should rest on absolute freedom of thought and discussion. There must be complete freedom of the press, along with complete and unrestricted freedom of speech.
That's a big one right there.
That's the foundation, I think, and that's what he's saying. He's like, for there to be a free society, there must be complete freedom of the press, along with complete and unrestricted freedom of speech. Without freedom of speech, you don't have a free country. Mm-hmm. You don't have free individuals.
Too much is hidden.
Mill believed that although words have the power to cause harm, state regulation can create far more serious problems. So he's saying it's not perfect. It's like Winston Churchill says, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all other forms of government. And I think that's the reality of humanity and human flaws. So Mill believes that although words have power to cause harm, he says that state intervening in the situation where words cause harm is far more serious than the actual words causing harm.
Right.
If you have to choose between the two, then you're just going to have to deal with the fact that people say mean things.
Right.
When he says the government can only intervene in a concrete fashion, he means in a concrete fashion, not in words are violence. So what we've done today on college campuses and what's been happening over the last, I'd say 5 years to 10 years is there's been this shift to say that words and hurt feelings and that words are violence and that words hurt. So that justifies the government coming in and intervening, or schools or anyone, to protect someone. John Stuart Mill is saying, no. It doesn't matter what anyone says in words. Words, the risk of the government coming in and then determining what speech is okay and what speech isn't okay, that is a far, far greater risk to people and their freedom and their autonomy than are the consequences of someone saying mean things or terrible things that you don't agree with. So he says regulation cannot be based on what a community believes to be appropriate or inappropriate. Mill cites the examples of Socrates and Jesus, who were put to death because they outraged public opinion. Although Socrates and Jesus went against public opinion, their beliefs did not harm people. Mill believed that the individual should be free to expound ideas. The state could punish a crime, but not the idea that motivated the crime. Well, today, no. With the censorship that's on all the social platforms, the censorship going on with big tech, they're saying the state should punish the idea that motivated the crime, or the words that motivated the crime. You incited violence. This was hate speech. This was that. So we need to intervene. John Stuart Mill is saying the individual should be free to expound on ideas, and that means you have to tolerate what anyone says, whether you like it or not, and whether it's harmful to a degree or not. Mm-hmm. And that's the cost of having freedom. The risk in not accepting that cost is that you lose all freedom completely. Many of Mill's ideas have relevance today. Mill believed that society must be willing to tolerate eccentricity as long as it does not harm others. Mill asks where government intervention will stop after it begins. He believed that governmental involvement in education presented a great danger to a free society. This is what gets interesting, and I want to talk about a little bit more today. As some of you know, we pulled our kids out of public schools, and we're homeschooling our kids. Mm-hmm. he's going to go into some details here that I think are relevant. Now, remember, this was written in 1859.
Right.
Which
is so crazy.
This is old.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are the reasons why. This is some of the things he believes on education. All education, he believes, should be private and should be the responsibility of the parents. He believed that the only purpose of compulsory education by the state was to train citizens to do the bidding of the state. State education will not develop a conscience in its citizens and will remove conscience and values imparted by parents. Although Mill did not support compulsory education, he believed that all people should read and write, and that parents might be required to teach reading, writing, and mathematics and certain facts. According to Mill, government involvement in education means that the state will impose its values, perhaps in the form of national education standards that ensure that every student knows the same things. By controlling educational credentials, the state effectively controls all aspects of education. He's just saying when the state gets involved, they interfere with what the parents are teaching their kids. They interfere with what that might align on some levels and in other levels it won't. But the state isn't motivated to raise them into the sort of people you want them to be. The state is motivated into raising them to be supporters of the state.
Right.
The only purpose of compulsory education by the state is to train citizens to do the bidding of the state.
Yeah. The part that gets me is that they're not there to uphold values that the parents teach. That is really scary.
Well, and when I was a kid, a lot of times they didn't push values. They just taught science, math, English, right? But now, yes, there's definitely the whole thing is about justice and social justice.
But even when you're learning in history, they used to talk about the values that this person possessed and why they got to where they were and how they were an incredible person. History's really changed.
Yeah. He talks about how he opposes state regulation of drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
And I felt this way for so long. If it's marijuana, if it's drinking, if it's seatbelts. And he kind of goes through a bunch of this stuff, saying the state has no business telling you. The government really isn't. Yeah, it sucks that he talks about, people getting addicted to gin.
Yeah.
Kids at 5 years old, 6 years old, because they go into the store and they buy it with
a nickel,
and then they get drunk on gin, and they're alcoholics by the time they're 10. And he's like,
"That's really sad that it's like that, but
it's really bad. It's not great. It's a bad idea." But at the same time, he's saying, but the alternative is that the government comes in and says, "Sorry, you can't do this. You can't do this thing unless you're this age." Okay, that should be something that parents do, that society does on its own without the government intervention. Seatbelts. Right. Look, you don't put your seatbelt on, you win the stupid prize.
Right.
And you get in a car accident, you die. Like that's an individual choice. Why is there a law for that? Those are sorts of things where
it didn't used to be a law.
Those are things that that irritate me. The government shouldn't be involved in people's business. Where do they draw the line? When do they stop? They get that permission, then they get more permission, they get more permission, they get more laws, and then more law. And I'm like, I don't need your damn safety. I don't need you to put in laws to regulate I'm a grown man. Leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
I think that it's arrogant for the state to come in and start telling everybody what they can and cannot do. I think it's a huge mistake to allow that. Laws are only, by the way, only as good as your enforcement.
Right.
Most of these laws are just a show of action, and then you do nothing to enforce those laws.
Right. More like recommendations.
Especially gun control laws. So going on, he says, Mill believed that true liberal democracy will limit the role of government as much as possible. It will intervene to protect an individual who is being physically harmed, and will have courts to ensure justice for those who are harmed, but giving the state the ability to intervene in the life of individual citizens is dangerous. For the same reason, Mill believed that allowing government to intervene in health matters is dangerous.
Interesting.
Mill would argue that the reason we accept intervention in our lives has to do with compulsory education, which is designed to produce dutiful citizens. The state does not educate people in some noble, abstract, and eternal ideal of justice, but in the name of government convenience. Mill was opposed to Machiavelli and Plato in his defense of the right of the individual to live exactly as he chooses, in defense of what contemporary Americans view as the ideal today. So these ideas are kind of interesting because he's saying the government shouldn't get involved in our lives. It should be as small as possible, and it should only get involved for very basic things. When it's concrete, it's understood, and it's physically harming you, or it's stealing your private property or damaging your business and all of that. That when the government starts imposing rules for your health and safety, then they can justify almost any action in the name of health and safety to strip away your rights, your individual freedom.
Right. And
you see an erosion of freedom as people beg for safety and protection. And that's a slippery slope because it leads down a totalitarian road where the government then acts as though they're better than you. They know better than you. You're too stupid to know what's good for you. And they're going to impose their ideals and their values on you. And you're going to like it. And you're going to do it no matter what. And too bad.
And now they're becoming the better men.
Yeah. And you see this today, like with the school system. You're seeing them turn out little activists. Mm-hmm. This isn't our personal experience here is we've seen us instill values into our children, teach them important things, and then for them to go to school and come home and think their parents are stupid and the school knows everything. And there's a lot of pressure in form of teachers, curriculum, but even peer pressure, and then just stuff across
and also
social platforms and the internet.
That's huge.
And there's a lot of influences going on that are coming down on your kids. If you think about it, and I had learned some things recently. Some 8 hours of my kid's life is spent at school.
Not at home.
Yeah. And I'm turning my kids over to other people that I don't know
what they're really teaching.
I don't really know them as individuals either.
Right.
And then I'm allowing my kids to spend 8 hours of their lives around those people and around their curriculum, around their ideas, and then around peers that also have some bad ideas because those peers don't have parents that give two damns about them or take care of them or restrict their use of the internet, which is a portal to hell. And you
can be.
And you have some serious problems. And I see that. Then they have another estimated 8 hours of inculcation from society per day in the form of TV, in the form of entertainment, social media, the internet, and so on. That's some 16 hours a day that our kids are being hit with stuff that generally, on the whole, I don't agree with. I want to teach my kids to be independent, to be strong, to take accountability, to be responsible, that they are individuals. They're not part of some group. They don't need an identity group to be assigned to. They don't need their pronouns. They don't need all these things they are an individual, a unique human being with that's not part of a group. Yet there's a pressure for these kids to jump into some group category and to label themselves with 3 or 4 different group categories to define who they are. That doesn't define a person. Mm-hmm. Those categories don't make up who I am.
Right.
My sexuality, my skin color, those things are just parts of what I am, but they don't define who I am. I'm Brian Call.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of pressure right now for them to, in our world.
Well, and I feel like faith is a big part of it. I feel like, faith is just non-existent.
Well,
in school.
Yeah, well, I think any kind of moral duty is kind of pushed aside in general.
I don't know if your schools did this, but we had National Day of Prayer in my high school, and we all just gathered around the flagpole, and everyone could pray in their own way on the National Day of Prayer.
Yeah, we never did that.
I don't see any of that happening anymore. Like, bring your Bible to school day, and Like,
Well, there is a separation of church and state that's pushed hard. And I understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it's a problem with your kids going to public school because there's so many different opinions on what they should be taught now
and what they need to care about.
And there's so one of the things that you've been seeing is, a lot of parents have been rising up and saying, we don't like what's being taught in the public schools. We're finding books in libraries that are sexualizing my kids or teaching them things
completely
in kindergarten
for their level.
Sexual acts in kindergarten. There's pedophilia in these libraries that's glorified in books.
It's not just in the libraries; it's some required reading for some English classes.
And so there's just some crazy stuff going on at these schools. So parents have kind of woken up to this, including us and many others, saying, no, I'm not okay with this. And I'm seeing its effect on my children. I'm seeing it. Like, it's plain as day. It's dark and it's not good.
It's corrupting our youth.
So when I pull my kids out of school because I have no faith in the public school system, the school system is creating a dutiful activist.
Well, and a lot of it is very hidden.
But it's also, I think it's robbing kids of their future because these ideas don't make them happy.
Right.
They don't actually teach them wisdom.
Right.
They teach them activism. It's just not good. And I don't know. At this point, I'm done. I'm done with the state indoctrinating my kids.
Yeah.
We've pulled them out and we're teaching them at home. And it's been...
I think what you could call this, we're circling our wagons. And we're filling them with things that are really important, getting back to the basics and what we want them to learn. Not all the extra stuff that doesn't matter.
Well, and you see it on, you get out there and you see what we're teaching them versus what the school was teaching them, the books that we're having them read versus the books that they were having them read. There's a night and day difference. The other thing that I've noticed is, like I said before, if you do a little digging, you start to find out that social media moguls and owners and stuff aren't letting their kids anywhere near a social media device.
Right.
They're not letting them get on even smartphones or own one. Their kids have no phones or they have a flip phone.
Right.
Why is it that all these CEOs and leaders of these social media companies that do research on the effects of social media and of the internet and stuff on young people, why are they then totally banning it from their families? Well, meanwhile, selling it to the public. That's a disturbing.
Yeah.
That should raise red flags for every parent whose kid has a smartphone.
Well, I think it's especially damaging for young women. Especially.
That's what the studies have been showing.
Yeah, and there's just a huge increase in depression and anxiety, especially in girls and females. And I just feel like, wow, a lot of that is social media or trying to find where they belong, But yeah, we haven't really let our kids on social. We've kind of kept them from that.
We have, but the kids find ways around it.
Right. Through other kids.
We put a lot of restrictions on the phones and stuff, and they found ways around that as well. And then the deeper our kids went down some roads, then they could just go to school, and over half the kids in school have an unfettered access through their phones to whatever they want.
Right.
And they're all messed up. So if they don't get it from the school books and they don't get it from the teachers, they get crap from their peers. And I'd argue teenagers are so desperate to be in an in-group and to be accepted and to be friends and to have friends.
Well, I think there's influences everywhere. And if you asked me 2 years ago if I wanted to homeschool, I would have said no. Mm-hmm. Then that I thought it was really important for them to be able to be around those people and still function and learn. But now I look at who they're exposed to, who they're around, and I think, you know what? These teachers don't care if my kid's depressed. They don't care what my child becomes. They don't care if my kid has faith. They don't care if they progress or go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I care about those things. I care a lot about those things. You know?
And I feel like I still want to fight for public schools.
Right.
I want to go to the school board meetings and I want to say, yep, these things aren't acceptable. I want to pay attention to voting, who we vote onto these boards. But I don't think that your kid has much of a chance. Most kids have much of a chance in this current environment to do well. Bringing my kids home, they're around me all day. They're around Suzanne all day.
Sometimes they don't love.
I don't care. They're around their parents. That's who is influencing them all day. Not some person, some stranger. I'm sure there's a lot of good teachers out there. There's a lot of bad ones. And it just takes the one. And peers. They're around peers we approve of. They're not around the other ones. And honestly, there's going to be people that are like, you're too strict. No, we're not. And I think each kid's a little bit different and individual, by the way. But you've got to fight for your kids. Mm-hmm. You've got to fight for them. You got to.
I hate to say it, but you have to care a little bit less about other people's feelings and what they think of you, which is, for me, kind of hard. You, not so much. But yeah, I go, oh, what if those people think this? And Brian's like, who cares? What matters at the end of the day is our kids. And I guess as a parent, I have to think that way more.
Yeah, I don't, those things don't cross my mind. I'm kind of fiercely independent. Like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm going to say what I want to say. I don't really think too much about, I try to be polite. Like, I like to be agreeable with people. I try to be nice, but I don't care if I make you upset.
Right.
They say you're like the 5 people you hang out with the most. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So think about that.
Yeah, that can be so
studies
true
behind
with kids.
That to show that that's true.
Our children are like little adults, mm-hmm. and they're not fully formed yet. And they say what? Like, you're not really fully formed until the age of 25.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that and who they're hanging out with, well, take a look at their friends. Have they been choosy? Have they not been choosy? And then they're going to become like that friend. Are you okay with that?
Well, that's just it. If they're around us most of the time and we're teaching them values and they're around us and a few people that we really like, and the truth is they didn't like coming out of school, and yet they didn't also, we took away their cell phones, we took away all computers, we took away all access to social and the internet, and completely done.
We went cold turkey big time.
And within weeks, we saw different human beings. And
they're smiling more, they're laughing more, they're doing
creative things. They're out there painting and drawing. They're painting. They're doing activities. They're actually engaging with their hands. They're in nature. They're going for walks. Our daughter got up this morning at 8:00 this morning and went on a long mountain walk with a friend of hers, a neighbor. Yeah. And it's like, she would never have done that if she had her cell phone.
Right.
It just wasn't going to happen. And we're starting to see these kids, they don't know it, but they're changing.
They are.
And, removing all those influences that were just bombarding them with stimulus every day, and then replacing them with positive activity and a lot of time spent at home with the family. And we still go out and do things. We're going to go on a bunch of hunts and some camping trips together. They're going to experience life again. The problem I think that people don't realize with social media is, and how dopamine works and how your brain works, there's a true addiction to phones, and there's people, most
people
people
just
today
gotta take those breaks.
They're in love with this thing. They can't put it in their pocket and not pull it out and look at it every few minutes. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot to it in terms of the smart devices that we have today that are triggering all these kind of excitement and all the likes that you get and all these endorphins and all the dopamine, pleasure hormones going on because of this stuff. It's happening through those devices. And it's hard for them to then take joy in a sunrise or to go outside and enjoy a walk.
Nature
and things, because the super stimulus from the phone and that social environment,
it's just such a disconnect.
It takes over. And pretty soon, I think these kids are just not able to enjoy the wholesome things, the good things.
It's so true. When we first, this is not for everyone. If you did this to some other kids that maybe were, I don't know, different parents, maybe this would not work. Maybe this would fail completely. But I feel like just having this positive catalyst of just only good things within their reach, eventually we'll see a good transformation.
I think that it's pretty universal at this point that we know that these devices are bad for youth. That the internet, that the computers, that all this super stimulus is bad for the youth. I think video games are in the same category. I think there's good things about it.
There's great things about research and finding these lectures and reading and
books. And we share those things right now.
Right.
But think about it. It's different having this device when you're 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Well, absolutely.
Then when you're on it a lot when you're 25. There's a lot of growth that happens during this period. Neurons are firing. There's a lot of changes in
self-regulation is more
in your body and
matured.
Your brain, and now you're out there rewiring it through like, for example, a lot of gaming people going through depression, pornography addicted people.
Yeah.
That's similar to what you're dealing with social media addictions. Like these people are, their brains from the age of 11, 12, 13 are getting wired.
There's a lot of body dysphoria, eating disorders, all connected to social media.
And the thing is we've pulled all that away and we don't have it. We don't miss it. Like it's been peaceful. And
I think it's like chopping off a limb.
At first.
Of a tree. Like it's going to leave a mark and it's going to take a while to grow over. And to overcome that part gone. Yeah. It's going to take a while.
I think we had to make some adjustments because it's a sacrifice to homeschool. You got to have, some people have two working parents. Honestly, though, I think that right now, if you want to ensure the future of your kids,
we're very fortunate.
I highly doubt.
We're very fortunate
that someone's going to be able to pull that off. I highly doubt someone. I have no faith in the current school system. Now, there are areas I know that are rural that are better and where kids do them pretty well. And I know kids that are pretty resilient, are so mature for their age, and they make really good decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying this is a one size fits all.
Right. Absolutely.
I am saying though that on the whole, I don't see how you can go wrong. I don't see how a person goes wrong taking their kids out of public school.
Right.
And homeschooling them.
Right.
And I got to tell you, our relationship with them is growing because of all the time spent together. And that's a powerful thing. Kids, the other thing about kids is respect and appreciation, gratitude. That's something our kids, we've been working on a lot. Like, you should be grateful for the country you're in. And and things could be so much worse. We watched a couple of movies recently because I wanted them to see, what real oppression looks like, what real struggles look like. Like, I don't want to hear you whine. Look at what it could be like. You live in one of the wealthiest times in world history. Every human being has a hyper fast computer in their pocket and drives a pretty decent, at least has a car. And can get to places, and you can go to this grocery store and everything you want is always there, except for lately. And except for recently.
Yeah.
So something to consider. I just think that teaching them gratitude and instilling humility in them and all that, we weren't winning that battle. We weren't winning that when they were in the public school system. We are more now. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have gratitude, if they don't have humility, if they're not, if everything around them, they're oppressed and they don't recognize how incredible the nation we are in and the time we live in.
Yeah.
They're not headed to a happy place.
Right.
And It's been hard to get that idea across.
Well, no, it's not just about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the pursuit of purpose and faith.
Yeah.
And that's completely gone.
Yeah.
With what they're learning. Well, what they were.
What was it that Denzel Washington said? We were listening to a speech he gave,
mm-hmm.
and he said, "Don't just do what makes you money. In your career, talking to some college graduates, don't just do what will bring you an income.
Right.
Don't strive to make money." He said, "Strive
to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Like whatever you do everything you can to make a difference."
That is a purpose-driven life. That is also a life with faith.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things.
Denzel said, "Put your slippers under your bed at night."
Right.
So that when you get up in the morning,
you have to hit
your knees to get them. And then while you're down there,
yeah,
go ahead and say, "I'm thankful for humility. I'm thankful for where I live. I'm thankful for kindness. I'm thankful for my wealth, my income, my whatever meager,
right.
however meager it is. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for all these things." And there's a lot of.
But he said, don't stop there. He said, also thank him for everything that you don't have yet that you will be blessed with.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a smart man.
Wise man. He's also one of those people who has said repeatedly that,
set goals, make goals, be what you want to become.
People are in the position they're in because they're individuals.
They work hard.
Not because of a group identity that they have.
Right.
No one keeps you back but yourself. Talked about the 3 boys that he grew up with that all ended up in prison while he ended up somewhere else. And he said, why I ended up where I was? Because I had a dad. And he taught me. And then my other friends didn't.
Wow.
And I'm who I am, and I have God in my life, and these others are victims and say, they're oppressed and can't get ahead. And someone who is that far ahead in life as a Hollywood actor obviously believes that they're an individual and that they can achieve whatever they set their mind to.
He made things happen. He also said he was flunking out of college.
Yeah.
And there was a lady in the hair salon that had a prophecy about him.
Yeah.
And she get out a pen or pencil and write down this prophecy about him.
Yeah, while she's under a hairdryer.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
And she was pretty spot on about his life, but he was like, this lady is crazy.
Yeah.
When he first heard it all.
Yep.
But
anyway, it's just food for thought, guys. I think it's interesting that John Stuart Mill, as he talks about liberty and freedom, and he warns, he's like, hey, the only thing that the state is going to do in the end is turn out dutiful little citizens,
government
activists
yes.
that serve the state.
Yes.
They don't have another motive. Their motive isn't to turn your kids into happy, successful people. They're there to turn them into dutiful followers of the state, mm-hmm. dutiful people who serve the state. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that state schools over time, they're going to slowly become, the state only gets paid, the school only gets paid by the state or the government when they do what those government officials want.
Right.
They hold the purse strings. You want to get paid, your government funds, teach these things that we want. Well, over time, you're going to slowly slide that pendulum over until the state is getting what they want taught instead of what parents want taught in schools. Right. Instead of what parents think is useful and important, the state is determining what's important. And you see it in what the governor said the other day. Parents shouldn't be allowed to determine what kids are taught in school. The state should. I mean,
which is crazy because, I've been pretty active about going to what's being taught in sex ed mm-hmm. with our 2 older kids. And I remember going to one of the best schools in Colorado when we lived there. And I showed up and I'm like, am I the only parent who actually cares about this? Because I showed up 5 minutes early and nobody was there. I kind of hung back in my car and I was like, this is really strange. And then as I went in, there was 50 cars that all showed up at the same time, and a whole bunch of parents, and parents who wanted to see the actual books and see everything that was being taught. And now schools are allowing things to be talked about before they open those books. And there's a lot of dishonesty happening there, and what they're talking about with your children happens before that sex education week happens.
I went to a youth event, and at the youth event they were teaching all these young kids this stuff, and it was trash. I really despised what they were. I was there for about 3 days, and they were teaching they were promoting some immoral and toxic ideas type of CRT, critical race theory kind of things, and Keynesian sexuality and things. And I was like, whoa, if I knew this. But then the parents all came on the last day of the 4-day camp, and the parents showed up on the last day, and they did all these skits and all these get together things and all this stuff. And they presented to those parents a completely different picture of what that camp taught all week long and what the whole thing was about. They were night and day different. And I was like, they are lying. They are lying to these parents, these parents are thinking they're bringing their kids to these places to learn some important work ethic and some values and some outdoor things.
Life lessons.
And then what did they do? As soon as their parents weren't around, they taught them trash and garbage and filth. And then when their parents showed back up, they put the mask back on and taught them all the other things. So I think as parents, there's a diligence we have, a due diligence we need to perform in protecting them, because there's a world out there of people who do not care and in fact have an agenda to sexualize or to use your kid or to manipulate them.
I'll tell you what's kind of crazy is there was a new teacher put in one of our daughter's classes, and I asked if I could just sit in on the class to kind of help, because my daughter had been complaining that this teacher had been really mean towards her and to other kids. And when I talked to the teacher about sitting in, she wouldn't let me sit in. And then I talked to the principal. I'm like, why am I not allowed to sit in on my own kid's class? Like, oh, well, that's just how this teacher likes it, and she's adjusting, and it doesn't help to have parents there. And I'm just thinking, this is crazy. This is crazy that I can't go in and see what's actually being taught to my kid if I don't want to do it. You know, like, it just like really rubbed me the wrong way.
I think more and more parents are being told, you don't have a say here.
Yeah. If you don't think this is happening, you should try to sit in on a kid's class and see how willing they are to let you do that. It's even
a lot of this. I think
everywhere.
A lot of stuff has been exposed as it's been on Zoom calls and Skype due to the pandemic, and so a lot of parents have seen what's being taught, and then just over time, you're starting to see these kids and what they're turning out like, and parents are going,
pretty liberal teachers.
Who are you? In 1 year, you went from this type of kid over to here to this psychopath that's completely lost and doing destructive things and suicidal. What happened?
Yeah.
And then you dig into what these kids think and believe, and you realize you didn't learn that here.
Right.
You learned that somewhere else. Where? And you find out it's in your school group and in your peer group.
It's in the creative writing assignments. And even if you don't agree
French
with the
classes,
writing assignments,
it's
they
in your
still
math
make
classes.
you write them. Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
And then there's so much peer pressure to conform, because if you don't, there's all the negativity that you get labeled with really negative terms.
I think also peers kind of steer clear of you. Like, one of our kids kind of had that happen to her, you know. She stood up for something and said, well, that's not how I think, and, you know, I don't really want to write about that. And she was kind of forced to write it anyway, you know. But then she said a lot of kids started acting weird around her, like not really talking to her. And it's just like, you know, what happened to being able to think how you want to think? And she's like, well, if you don't write it a certain way, you don't get a good grade too.
Right.
And I'm like, who cares?
I know.
Who cares about that grade?
And I'm at this point here where, the government has lost all of my goodwill and my trust. So at this point, they're not in the school system. They're done. They're out. And I'm enjoying it, and I'm excited. They're going to go with us, with the Lampers and the Livisays, to go on a family big group hunt. We're going to go on another hunt in January, February time frame, in the desert. We're going to go maybe even New Mexico, Arizona. We're going to go do some things as a group, and we're going to take some camping trips to Moab. And it's nice because they're homeschooled. They can homeschool every morning for a few hours and get their work done. And it only takes a few hours. The amount of time they waste in public school is ridiculous.
It's pretty crazy.
They're accomplishing all the same learning in a fraction of the time that they waste at school. So it's been cool.
What's interesting is that our youngest was complaining when she was in public school, how she didn't have any time when she got home from school.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we pulled her out, she was complaining how she wasn't at school. And one of her sisters actually said, well, now you have all this time. And it wasn't even us who had to say it. And I was like, yeah, you have so much time to be creative and do and make.
And at first there was an
read.
adjustment. There was an adjustment period that didn't go so well. But then now they're in a flow and you're seeing a difference. Look, I'm just at a point where I realize for me, if I fail on the family front with my kids, so much of the rest of my life loses its beauty.
Yeah.
And what greater thing can we invest in than our own families? And I think the nuclear family or families, they are what is the heart and soul of a nation. So we have a lot to teach and a lot of responsibility as parents to give our kids the best tools and the best chance to have a meaningful and full life. And if that means pulling them out of school, spend a little more time away from career and job to make it happen, I think it's well worth the price paid. And I don't mind paying it. I think that there are far fewer things in life that can give you more, that can give society and yourself more reward, more joy. So that's where we're at with this. It's interesting that this book, written in 1859, it goes on and on and on about government involvement in education and how that is the single worst idea on the planet. And if you'd asked me back then, or 100 years ago or 50 years ago, if public education was a bad idea, I'd have been like, no, it's a great idea. Nothing wrong with it. And now I can see where John Stuart Mill is coming from as it's morphing into something that most Americans don't approve of. And you can see it started out on college campuses, and that toxic, those sick ideas, those stupid, lame ideas that got taught there have been spreading to K through 12, and now you're seeing it in other places in society, and they're stealing our youth. And I'm madder than hell.
I always look at California, because I grew up in California until I was a freshman in high school, and everything happened fast there. It was the first. It's like the trendsetter of the United States. You take a look at the climate in California right now. It's just falling apart. They're rioting. The school systems are fighting.
They just passed a law in California. They just passed a law in California that I think it's 12 years old. You can have uninformed hormone treatment.
Yes.
You don't have to tell your parents by law. As early as 12, I think. That's insane. You can also have surgery. Like, you can have your breast removed and things like that without parental consent needed. As a minor. Like, what is the insanity here, folks? I'm just saying, at this point,
there's just so much disintegration that's happening. On so many levels. So, pay attention to what's happening in California, because the trickle is already started. It's already trickled into where we're living. I think it's a tsunami at this point, and this homeschool rates are through the roof right now. Like, you see massive numbers of Americans pulling their kids out of public schools across the nation, and in our area, so I think it's 40% of the kids in our state are 40 to 50% are all homeschooled.
that's a ridiculous
crazy.
number.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous number.
Yeah.
It's funny because our kids, when we say they're out playing or going for a walk, they're doing that because all the kids that live around us are all homeschooled too. Yeah. Everybody's homeschooled. So everybody's home.
Yeah.
They get their schoolwork done, they get some chores done, and then they hang out all day and they do kid stuff. You know, it's so much healthier, so much better. I wish only we had been wise to it sooner and made the moves. So, you know, you got kids. I think getting them off of social, take their phones away. Yeah. They don't need phones. If you want them to have a flip phone, get them a flip phone. They don't need phones.
We have girls, and they cried, and they wailed, and they freaked.
They made us
pretty
cry.
Bad. Yeah.
They hated us. It was a kicking, dragging, screaming, how dare you, you're a horrible person. I won't talk to you for a week.
But at the end of the day, we're parents, not friends.
Yeah.
We're parents, not friends.
Well, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, I totally care how they turn out.
It's like, hate us, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm making the right choice. I'm doing the right thing. And you have to believe that as a parent. You can't second guess. I mean, you should always be skeptical of everything, second guess everything. What I mean is when you're pretty firm and that this is the right decision, do it.
Yeah.
And then stand by it and have faith
about it.
Have faith in your decision. Yeah. If you really, you have to, I say this all the time, you have to fight. You have to fight for your kids, and that means you have to fight them because kids are tough. You want to love them, but sometimes you're one of those parents that has like the kid that just seems to get it and sails on through.
That was me.
That was me. But I'll say that our kids, we didn't get kids like us.
No, well,
you know, we'll see. We don't know. Yeah. We also didn't have, admittedly, I grew up where I had awesome teachers, awesome history teachers, especially. I had some phenomenal history teachers. I had some great teachers who inspired and taught me some incredible things where I grew up. My kids don't have those people. Yeah. They don't have that school system anymore. That school system is a relic of the past. It doesn't exist right now. A shadow of it maybe in some areas, but it exists at our house. Superintendent's missed call or whatever, and Mr. Call, we're teaching at our house. So anyway, I hope you guys found that useful. Check out the book On Liberty by John Stuart Mill if you want to get a little more into that. Interesting that it's this old and yet warned of this exact thing that I see happening on schools today. Thanks for tuning in. Use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops. Use the code GRITTY at Black Ovis for all your hunting stuff. Peaks. Get some gators, some trekking poles. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks for tuning in and supporting us. Really appreciate it. Stay gritty.